James, if we win 3-1, I'm going to set a flare off in my house.
I was about to ask you about that. Hello and welcome to the First4LCFC Podcast, episode number 31. And I am delighted to say that for the first time in quite a while, we've got a full complement on the pod. As always, my name is Jamie Thorpe, and joining me today is Christian Mosen, our American friend Austin Forbes, and finally making his long-awaited return is Ed. How are you all?
Very well, all good.
That was a glorious introduction as always, and obviously it's good to be back, even if you don't call me by my real name.
Well, Ed, it is really good to have you back. We know you've been off busy having a really big brain and doing a PhD, but it is great to have you back. The question which all the fans really want to know the answer to straight off the bat, though, is are you going to be getting off the fence during this podcast, or are you going to be getting splinters as per usual?
Given that you literally said a minute ago that I'm not getting involved in things because you're impartial, I don't want to say you're being hypocritical, but as always, I will be honest and fair.
But for someone who spends 40 hours a week minimum basically debating a PhD, you are explicitly patient to sit on this fence. So maybe we can push you off a bit today.
It's always good to make comments once you've considered all possible options.
See,
early in the season, I didn't have all this data to hand, so I wasn't willing to make a firm comment, but maybe today you'll get something out of me.
Well, Krys has often described you as a bit of a master debater, or as something else, I don't know, but let's get right into it. As usual, we're going to discuss all the big Leicester City talking points, and last week's episode, we all remarked on, was a little bit sombre. We were a little bit glum because things haven't been going so well. And unfortunately, this is exactly the same. A wake of another loss. Krys, you've been fairly critical. But this game, Leicester started pretty well, didn't they? Seemingly just a final touch away from opening the scoring. But you've remarked that this seems to be a bit of a theme.
Yeah. Well, like you say, it's one of those nights. It's got to that stage where you're watching a game, and regardless of how well we start, unless we score, you've just got this ominous feeling. And I was messaging Austin during the game yesterday that if we don't put one of these chances away, they're going to go up the other end and punish us. It might take 60, 70 minutes, but if we don't score, it's just the way football goes. The opposition's going to get a chance. It was such a bizarre start, though, wasn't it, yesterday? There was 3 clear-cut sort of openings. We were just sort of sliding straight through their midfield. Gilmore was having a nightmare, but we just couldn't make it count. As professional footballers, one of the main things you can't forgive is having a poor first touch. It's like sort of riding a bike. You don't forget how to do it. So surely as a professional, the one thing you can be guaranteed to have is a 90% first touch, but we just didn't have that yesterday at all throughout the whole game, and that was the most frustrating thing for me.
Yeah, it seemed that we went ever so close. I mean, Barnes, Tielemans, Vardy, their touch all let them down at the crucial moment. But Ed, I mean, in a weird way though, can you take a bit of confidence from that, in that the performances were so bad and so lacking that spark against Watford and Brighton? For Leicester to be getting into those positions is surely a good thing in a way.
Yeah, so it was such a low baseline, I guess, in the first couple of games that it'd be hard not to improve. So yeah, the fact we're starting to look slowly better is a sort of a positive thing. But I guess, at least in the league anyway, we can't really take these 3 games to slowly get into things when the teams around us are also winning. So if it takes another couple of games to get into our groove, even if we do end up firing come the end of the season, it's we might not be in the top 4 anymore by that point. So I feel like things need to start clicking and fast.
I mean, the fact that Leicester have taken this time to click, and like you said, they weren't exactly clinical, but on the other side, Chelsea have started well, Austin, and they had that quality when it really mattered. Does this worry you as we sort of come into the final stretches of the race for the top 4?
I mean, it's been worrying me since Watford. I don't think it was really this game, but I mean, like Ed said, it is a little bit encouraging that we showed at least something, but it just seemed to me after the first 20 minutes that we just didn't really have a chance of scoring, and we were always on the back foot. It just really didn't. It just didn't feel to me that after those first 20 minutes where we looked great, we were pressing, we were going through the midfield like butter. Our just first touch let us down, but it just seemed after that we didn't really have a plan on what to do and how to counterattack, especially when Chelsea brought on Kovacic, Barkley, and Azpilicueta. It just didn't seem we really had an answer to that.
I mean, Krys, is that one of the biggest problems for Leicester? We've spoken before about the lack of squad depth, and like Austin says, Lampard really changed the game with his subs, whereas by comparison, ours were pretty ineffectual. Do you think this is down to the manager or the lack of squad depth, or a bit of both?
It's becoming a bit of a recurring theme, though, isn't it, in terms of what we're debating? And it's, I think, one of Rodgers' flaws that you could have maybe criticised him for at previous clubs is that when his back is to the wall, he might lack that plan B. And I think that's what he's getting found out for. To me, it just seems like when we're in need of a change, his message is literally, okay, let's just try and float more balls over the top to Vardy. It's clearly not been working when you've tried it in the first half, but let's maybe try now. You've got O'Brien on pitch. You try do that instead. And it just wasn't working. There doesn't seem to be the right personnel on the bench, which obviously is a thing that is going to take a couple of transfer windows to sort of build up. But you look to our bench and, it doesn't fill you with confidence. There's no obvious changes that you can sort of recommend. And the golfing class was presented yesterday. I think for me, something that we've discussed before again is that I do think we do need a target man. And that's not to say we should change what Rodgers' plan A is, because I think if we do work on it hard enough and with a couple of alterations to the personnel, we can have a very strong game plan. But on occasions like this, when nothing's working, there's no shame in bringing on a bigger man to bring the ball down and then have Vardy play off him. Maybe as Vardy's getting a bit older, to preserve his energy even more, using him as a really advanced forward isn't a bad thing. So for me, it's still down to target man. I know Rodgers said it's not the way he wants to play, but the way he's playing isn't working. So maybe it is time to go back to the drawing board for me.
Ed, is that something that you think could work?
I just don't see it, Jeff. Who plays two up front these days? And I think especially if we want wingers as well, how would that work? So we'd have two wingers and Vardy and a striker and Maddison.
I'm not saying from the start of the game. I'm saying use the plan A. Like the system we're using is the modern, the fashionable way to play football, sure. But I'm saying not every game. You're not going to be going into every game winning it. So what would you recommend we do in a game where tactically we're inept? So do you not advise a change of system in any circumstance?
I don't think a big man is the answer. I think purchasing some wingers who can create a bit more would be useful, as well as obvious returning to form, but that's a lot easier said than done. Don't get me wrong. But yeah.
I think having that big man up top, it gives their defence a totally different issue. Like, say with one player, they can have two centre-backs sitting on him. If you bring someone else up there, then automatically there's a gap then created where there wasn't one before. I mean, I get what you're saying. I'm not suggesting we start with a 4-4-2 like Burnley. I'm saying that to chuck something different in there and put their defence on the back foot in a different aspect could be worth considering.
But yeah, no, definitely. But I think when you look at the players that came off the bench, for example, so Chelsea were really struggling in the middle. We were cutting through them in the first half, and they completely changed it. They brought on Barkley and Kovacic for Gilmour, who was poor, and Mount, who was pretty anonymous. Whereas when we needed to change the game, we brought on Demarai Gray and Mark Albrighton. And without wanting to be disrespectful to those two players, is it simply a case of a gulf in class with us not having the players outside the 11 that can affect the game.
I'd say so. Like, I know we've done amazing this season, and until the last couple of games, we've been at least a nice, comfy gap ahead of Chelsea. But when push comes to shove, when both teams have their whole squad fit, they are better than us. Like, at least in sort of depth and being able to make changes if things aren't going right. I know we've said a few times this year that actually, other than Liverpool and Man City, our first 11 is kind of a match for everyone. Whilst there's a couple of teams that may be slightly better, it's a good match. But after that, it's sort of a bit weak, isn't it? So I just thought that really showed at the weekend.
Yeah, there's definitely an element of that. But I think, like you say, you can change the personnel. But I think there's just sometimes it's the system that we're playing. It's too easy to defend against. So if you need to have that maybe factor of unpredictability, like if you look in modern times, like Spurs had Llorente, Chelsea have Giroud. Like it's not necessarily a fashionable way, and like I say, I wouldn't recommend starting that way. But as defences might start fatiguing, just to have that option, because it's all well and good bringing a winger on, but ultimately the job of a winger is to take a player on and deliver a cross. We haven't got anyone in the box who can necessarily get onto a cross that's anything above sort of an average head height. So to play for those knockdowns and those second balls is just adding an extra dimension to our game, which I don't think is that harmful, to be fair.
Yeah, certainly seems to make sense. I mean, two of the best chances we had came from crosses, didn't they? Be it corners or open play with Soyuncu and Evans' chance. So it certainly would seem to fit into that. But listen, looking at a sort of a wider point, as a bit contextually, we pointed out last week that since December the 14th, we've played 14 league games and won only 4 of them. Now, we were all chatting about what we think the actual reason behind this could be, because the players do seem a little bit bereft of confidence. We're not playing as well as we have previously. Ed, you mentioned that it's been pointed on Twitter that this directly coincided with that 1-1 draw with Norwich. Is this something that you think could have affected the confidence?
Well, it wouldn't all be a knock-on effect of that. I think at that stage of the season anyway, and the form we were in, we were sort of looking up in the table. We were thinking, even then, I know them ahead now, especially Liverpool, but Man City and Liverpool we were in touching distance. And, the 2 games after the one against Norwich were against Man City and Liverpool, and we lost them, 7-1 on aggregate. It was a bit of a whooping. And it's just been so long, hasn't it, since the start of the season when we were sort of formidable, and you just went into games thinking, like, we went on a great run with our defence as well. It wasn't just we were scoring consistently, we were constantly keeping clean sheets, and now we're not doing either, really. That's just in the league, even before the lockdown, other than the win against Aston Villa, we didn't score against Brighton. We scored right at the end against Watford. We didn't score against Norwich. We didn't score against Man City, and we didn't score against Wolves, all back to back. So there seems to be an issue both in attack and defence. And at the start of the year, when we were sort of banking on the fact we had one of the best defences, as soon as that goes, it starts to get a bit worrying.
I mean, yeah, you're absolutely spot on. Just to add some statistics to the context of that, since before and after that Norwich game, we're halving the amount of goals we're scoring. We're doubling the amount of goals we're conceding. And actually, if you take our total points trajectory, if we'd started the season halfway through, we'd be on for finishing 15th on 43 points. Like that is horrendously poor, and that is definitely not the sort of form we need. But Krys, I mean, you mentioned the Rodgers to Arsenal rumours. I mean, that's something that's gaining more and more traction. Is that something that you think might have had an impact?
Well, yeah, I've just double-checked the date. I believe he signed that contract on the 6th of December. That coincides, to be fair, the game we had straight after that was a 4-1 away victory at Aston Villa, so there's no immediate impact there. But then obviously after that, it's the home draw to Norwich, and then we sort of our form never really returned to any consistency after that. But for me, it's hard to, you can't pinpoint it to one thing. Like, it doesn't make logical sense that, the manager signs a new contract. Why would that necessarily then change anything? Like, if anything, it should impact the players positively. I don't think, that they suddenly just take their foot off the pedal. I think, I don't know, like you say, you don't want to be critical of anyone or the manager, but ultimately there has to be blame at the manager's doorstep for this, because like, he is in charge of training. He sees the players more than anyone else sees them. He can see the issues at first hand, and it's all well and good coming out after the match and saying, "Oh, we take a lot of confidence from this." Like, and there's a lot of pleasing things to take from it. But in reality, are there? Like, we've literally scored one goal since lockdown. That came after 90 minutes. Like, we're just not creating enough. So it's all well and good coming out of these cliches afterwards, but sometimes it might be refreshing to actually hear like a public ousting. I'm not saying like Jose Mourinho levels, but something to fire the players up, because sometimes publicly saying like we weren't good enough is literally what's needed. Like, a bit of embarrassment on the players, like behalf, because there's no point mollycoddling them, because we are literally slumping. And for me, to finish outside the top four now would be a disappointment. And I said that around Christmas, and I'll stick by that.
Well, just to add to that, on current form, I just looked at the form tables, and if the next 5 games go as the previous 5 games left, then with 2 games left in the season, we'll be 6th. So there's no room to sort of piss about anymore. It's sort of do or die, with Chelsea and Wolves are sort of winning every game, and Man U seem to turn the corner and are consistently getting results. And it really is a sort of a 4-horse race now, and it's not. Yes, we're leading it at the minute, but on current form, we may even come last in that race, which ain't ideal.
And also, I think the problem that we're going to look at is our running is not easy. We got Everton, and I can't remember the other team that we have, but then we go Spurs. I mean, not in this order, but we got Spurs, United, Sheffield, and Arsenal still to go this season. So it definitely does not get easier, and we're going to have to find it at some point, or this season that we did incredibly well for the first handful of games is just going to go.
Well, this is the thing. I'm looking at the fixtures, and Austin, the only ones you've missed out, to be fair, are Crystal Palace, right, and Bournemouth. But every game, the teams we're playing have got something to play for still. Mm-hmm. So whether it be at the bottom or the top, we've got an incredibly difficult run in. And like, Mike, I'm normally one of the most confident people about us, right, on this podcast, but like, I'd struggle to justify why we can beat Bournemouth away right now. Do you know what I mean? It's literally, it's hard to find confidence. So, and that's us as the fans saying that. Like, imagine how the players feel, because they're ultimately the ones that are carrying that pressure on their shoulders.
I mean, I said that last week's podcast was fairly somber, but this is this is following a fairly similar tack, isn't it? But you're right. It's hard to think where the wins are coming from. But on a slightly, let's try and be slightly more positive. I mean, were there any performances, Austin, within the game against Chelsea that you thought, actually that's an improved performance from that individual, or some reason to make you think that maybe we've not completely lost the pre-lockdown Leicester City?
Well, I mean, he didn't lose performance, but Kasper Schmeichel has by far been the best player that we've had since we've come back. Even the offsides that happened, I mean, he made 3 incredible saves that I can think of. And, I mean, of course he gave up the goal, but I don't think there was much he could have done. And I also think that Harvey Barnes actually looked decent for me. He didn't look too bad. He was creating. I was a little bit shocked. I wasn't really shocked, because it's not like they were going to take out Albright and that they put Gray in, but I would have been okay if they would have left Gray out. I mean, I told Krys this, and I mean, I kind of thought about it, but I really think we should have put Ian Acho on for Hamza Chowdhury, because Chowdhury just, there's no reason to have him on the field when we're chasing a game. He's just not that attacking option. And at least, especially with 5 subs, I mean, if a sub doesn't work, you can just take off a sub with a sub. Obviously, Pratt and Perez, due to fitness, they got taken off. But I mean, I think definitely Schmeichel, and I think James Justin did have a couple good tackles. I don't think he really did anything terrible. So he's hopefully getting more confidence, and I did think Barnes was actually decent.
Interesting point about Ian Acho, and I agree. Like, it's such a weird time he's had at Leicester. Like, he was useless, and then early in the year he started getting good, and we're like, oh, he's decent, play him, bring him on. And he did start changing games, and then now in a cup game with the chance to be in the semi-final of the FA Cup, when we need a goal, you think, yes, bring on someone who's actually scored this year and created stuff, but he didn't be brought on. Like, I understand.
That's what I'm saying, because for me, Chowdhury's like it's a bit of an unused phrase, but he's like a quarterback for me in football. He can pick up possession really deep, and yeah, he has got the ability for like a spray can sort of pass like 60, 70 yards, but that clearly wasn't what was working. And sure, he could break up play, and he put in a couple of fantastic tackles, to be fair to him. But ultimately, you got to roll the dice, don't you, in a cup game? And yeah, bring on Ian Acho again. You've got that presence of a player further up top, so it gives their defence something to think about. So again, it's a bit weird from Rodgers. But yeah, we can't really find an answer for that, can we?
No, I mean, we don't want to be playing the blame game too hard. But there is one thing that we do need to get to the bottom of. Krys, you have sparked something of a debate on our Twitter page, and lost us a load of followers as well. So if that's one of you, please re-follow us. We love having you around. So when it came to Chelsea's goal, so obviously they'd had a couple of chances before then, but for me, it sort of came a little bit out of nowhere. And the finger of blame has been pointed by many, many people all around Twitter. But Krys, I'm not going to start with you. I'm going to start with you, Ed. Is there one individual that you think is singling out here, or do you think it's a case of a catalogue of errors and that, in fact, there's a bigger picture at play?
Despite saying earlier I will have an opinion, I'm now actually going to sit on the fence. And say, unlike some others who you will hear their opinions later, I don't think we can entirely place blame at Chilwell's feet, who has been the player who's got most of the stick for it. Well, for possibly more than anything, the fact he was the most proximal player to the situation. He was marking his man, and somebody else wasn't marking Willian or tracking back. But I also think that maybe when Willian did get the ball, that whilst Chilwell shouldn't have just sprinted over to him and left his man, he could have at least stepped 1 or 2 steps in that direction to at least pressurise it a little bit. However, I don't think it's entirely his fault. And at the end of the day, he was kind of doing the planned job of someone's in this area, they're mine. So maybe he had to be a bit more flexible and use his initiative a bit more, but it's certainly not entirely his fault, in my opinion.
I was just going to say nothing there and see if someone who in particular wanted to jump in.
Well, no, I'll patiently, I'm taking on board. I think the way I've come across, so for those who haven't seen what the conversation's about on Twitter, is that it seemingly looks like I'm solely blaming Chilwell. I just want to clarify that's not what I'm doing. I just think that if I'm going to highlight a couple of players like what pundits do on TV, first and foremost, the ball's in possession. I've got a still of it, right? You can't see it, but I'm looking at it now. So Willian has longer than what we can potentially afford him to have. So all I'm saying is that rather than waving your hands around, for that second or so that he did, Chilwell can use that. It could be a run in vain, and Willian could play Azpilicueta straight back in, who could then have an even more threatening position. But what frustrates me is that the fact there was no effort on his behalf to do that. Yes, it might make him feel like he's an idiot playing like piggy in the middle between two players, but at least that's showing effort of other players. So you've got Harvey Barnes, who had more than long enough to drop into that space, and that's ultimately what Chilwell's saying, right? So I 100% agree with that. My frustration is purely down to the fact that rather than standing there waving your hands around, that's literally not solving anything, right? Try and close, put some pressure on Willian. You don't know what he's going to do. Any pressure is better than none. You've afforded a very good player too much time to put a ball right on the spot that he wanted to. Obviously, then you've got other issues. Sionchu's coming too far forwards, and Didi looks 2-3 times over his shoulder. He sees Barkley there. He doesn't do anything about it. Look, so there are other people to blame. I just think that to stop the immediate effect, try and close your man down. Yes, they might have still scored, but at least Chilwell would have actually tried to close the gap. The thing is, when you start waving your hands around, we see it too much in football. In other cases, it's play to the whistle, don't appeal for a foul. In this case, just keep running. At least it don't make you look stupid then. And then you can say, look, yeah, it was Harvey Barnes' fault because he didn't close the other man. But at least Chilwell, you'd have done all you can to stop the gap. That's all I'm saying.
Do you think, though, because the whole thing happened very, very quickly, this is modern football, it's Premier League football, it's very fast, as we know. When Chilwell was closing down Azpilicueta initially, before the ball was laid back to Willian, it was pretty obvious that it was a 2v1. It was fairly obvious to anyone watching it that Chilwell was playing pig in the middle and he was stuck. Do you not think that instead of him waving his arm around as if to say, what are you doing? Like, I'm giving up here. I'm just shouting at you lot. Do you not think that perhaps when he was chasing backwards towards Azpilicueta, he was assuming that his teammates would have understood the danger and moved to help him? So when he turned around, it was more, he didn't make the immediate move to Willian because he probably assumed, wrongly, that someone would have done it already, and it was merely more surprise and exasperation than anything else.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see it's a human reaction. I don't think he's had anywhere near enough time to think about it logically and go, no, I'm going to stop. And I use the phrase downing tools. Yes, it might be a harsh use of phrase, but to me, ultimately, is that like, it is a game of split seconds. But what annoys me is when people are responding to me saying, oh, would you rather he starts complaining once the ball's in the back of the net? There's no assurance that was going to happen. Like, do you know what I mean? He tries to close that down. I've expressed it, any pressure on Willian, even if the ball goes 1 foot to the left, that's not as perfect delivery as what it was. You know, so often we see players sliding in, the ball's like a whisper away from the toe, and that's not gone in the back of the net. At that point, absolutely blast the man, your teammate, for not tracking down, but just don't stop. Yeah, it might be human instinct, and therefore, and we'll never know the answer. But what frustrates me is when you see a player literally stop, which he did. And there's a reverse angle of the thing I responded to you on Twitter, Jamie. The reverse angle shows how criminal it is. It just looks like he's afforded Willian all the time he wanted in Leicester on that afternoon, and that's for me criminal.
I've watched this. Well, just for context again. I've got the video that we tweeted of this goal now on my screen, and throughout this conversation I've just been watching it. It's a 9-second video and it's on a loop, so I reckon I've probably watched this goal about 50 times now. And it's quite boring now, but actually I actually think the worst bit of it is the nothing to do with Chilwell or Barnes. It's Barkley, like Krys said, has had a complete free run. Like, there isn't one person like trying to close him down or put pressure on him. He's ran from about the edge of the sort of D on the edge of the box to the 6-yard line thing, free, and no one within about 5 or 6 yards of him, and he's just put it in. It's like Tielemans was sort of tracking him until he got onto the edge of box, and then he stopped running. And Didi, Krys says, knew it was behind him, so they both sort of knew. But yeah, well, it's all in hindsight, isn't it? It's easy to critique now, but I'm sure when it's all at full speed, it's not as easy to spot. But one thing I was thinking about actually when everyone was talking about Chilwell is he's such a divisive character at the minute. Like just from this game, I've seen he was at complete fault for this goal, or he wasn't at any fault at all. I've seen he was one of the best players on the pitch. Quite a lot of people have sort of said that in Leicestershire anyway. And also, I thought I'd pick your brains about it. There's been these pictures of him at the end, having a laugh with all the Chelsea players. I just wondered if anyone else has seen that, and if so, give it, considering both A, just knocked out of the cup, and B, he's been very heavily linked with moving to Chelsea at the end of the season. What are people's thoughts on it? Is it like maybe someone said something funny, or he's chatting with some mates and it's all right, or does it take the piss a bit?
Well, this is the thing where, without going full Roy Keane on it, and I'm not that aggressive about it, come on, if you're going to... It's just this is where you are a human and you can think about your actions. He must listen to the radio. He must see on TV players getting criticised this before, right? There's nothing wrong with having friendships, but ultimately, you've just been knocked out of the... You've just been knocked out of the FA Cup. Just save it for where there's no cameras. It's just that's a simple win. There's nothing wrong with having a laugh, but he knows there's fans who are going to be annoyed that they've been knocked out. So you just think a bit more about the circumstances, really.
Yeah, sorry. I think it could just be a bit of naivety on his part, like Krys says. I think, a football result for fans can make or break your weekend, can't it? Especially, and a loss in the FA Cup at this stage is really disappointing. So I think players just want to see that it matters. Fans want to see that it matters to the players as much as it does to them. And I think when a player like Chilwell, who must know that he's this divisive figure and must understand that he's been on the receiving end of a bit of criticism, it's just got to show that he's got a head on his shoulders and maybe not be pictured laughing. But at the same time, I think it's been built up beyond what it should have been. I think, like you said, it's one of his mates. It's a bad decision, but I think people go at Chilwell far, far more than they probably need to. I mean, there are pictures of Vardy doing the exact same thing with Guardiola after the game, having a laugh after we got beat by Man City, but there's no criticism there. So it's a bit of inconsistency from fans, but it's silly from Chilwell, isn't it?
I've seen that picture of the Jamie Vardy one, right? And I'm in a critical mood, so I'm going to keep going in on that as well. Pep Guardiola has physically grabbed Jamie Vardy and embraced him. That's sort of you've come into my space now. They're having a laugh.
Again, social distancing wasn't required then, though.
Yeah, but this is
different era.
It just seems like you see the pictures straight after the game, and it's just Chilwell is actively just happy to be having a laugh. Look, ultimately, it doesn't really matter. For me personally, it doesn't bother me, but I can see how it can be portrayed as it's just, it's not even unprofessional. It's just a bit insensitive potentially. But again, we're not snowflakes here. Have a laugh.
What do you think, Austin?
You know you're going to get criticised for it.
Have you seen the pictures?
Yeah, I haven't seen the pictures, but I've definitely read Twitter. But I mean, I'm with Krys. It doesn't truly bother me. It'll bother me directly after a loss, but everyone's going to be upset after a loss. But I mean, it really doesn't bother me. But I think he did need to wait till maybe they were in the tunnel and at least off camera. Especially because I don't know who it was with, but if I'm guessing it would be with with Mount or someone like that who's younger. It's played with them all through the youth system. Because we kind of see that with Madison a little bit. He'll do that too. But honestly, it doesn't care. It doesn't. Well, I don't really care. It's not going to bother me. But yeah, he probably should have been a little bit more smarter about that.
Yeah, so basically what we're saying is Chilwell, get your head on. I think that you're right, Ed, as well, in that I actually do think since the restart he's been one of our better players. But there are certain fans that won't necessarily see that. And for what it's worth, I thought that in the first half of yesterday's game, Tielemans was almost back to his, almost back to his pomp. He was intercepting the ball well, carrying it well, nearly slipped Vardy in once, had a good chance on goal himself. And that's given me a lot of encouragement, which leads us into the Everton game quite nicely. Austin, I mean, Rodgers is going to have something of a selection headache, isn't he? I mean, Maddison is possibly unavailable for this game with his hip injury, but both Pratt and Tielemans started the game well. Obviously, you've still got Chowdhury and possibly Maddison to play in the middle. How do you want to see Leicester line up for what is probably a make or break game at this point?
I think depending, because this is obviously depending on Maddison, because if Maddison is in, he plays, but he cannot play on the left. Like I can't see him playing there and working. So obviously he'll probably start on the left this weekend and we'll win, or Wednesday. But I think if he's out, you definitely keep the same midfield, because I love Tielemans and kind of the Maddison role where he didn't have to worry too much about tracking back. He can just worry about going forward. And I'm a big fan of Dennis Pratt. I don't know about other people, but I think he's one of the most underrated signings of the window, at least for us. I don't think anyone really thinks about it, but he's definitely done a really good job. I think I don't really see much change in our team. Obviously, if Maddison is healthy, I really don't know. I guess because we all say that Tielemans is such a confidence player, and when he has a decent game like that, you have to keep him going. So I don't think you should take him out, but I think it would be unfair to Dennis Pratt to take him out. But, I mean, James Maddison, the quality he can provide is pretty extraordinary. So I really don't know what to do.
Yeah, but this begs the question, sorry to jump in there, Jamie, but would Maddison have made a difference yesterday? And that's not me saying yes or no, it's generally a question. Like, what do you think, Jamie?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's the sort of player that can affect a game out of nowhere. And I think that yesterday would have benefited his style of play more, because there was the space opening up in the middle. And at one or two occasions, actually, we broke forward sort of, with 3-on-3 or 4-on-4. And that's when you need the player who's going to make the right pass, make the right decision at the right time. So Maddison hasn't been himself, I don't think, in the second half of the season, but you still got to have confidence that he's the man that you'd want on the ball at a crucial time. And you want to have your best players, especially, because one of the things we've not really mentioned is the fact that we're missing one of our best attacking players in Ricardo Pereira. Like we have lost one of our crucial players this season.
Yeah, I think we obviously mentioned it last week, didn't we? And I think it's all I can think about now. Like, in terms of any attack where we're going forward, like, you've got Justin who's still willing. He's probably the second furthest highest player in an attack on average when we're breaking. But it's just really highlighted for me how much of an asset Ricardo is in terms of. It's almost that factor of unpredictability, because he's not like the most silky, like he's not going to do like a couple of step overs and send you the wrong way, but somehow he finds a way, probably with pace more than anything, just to get to that byline and get a dangerous ball in, for Vardy. So I'm not sure what his and Vardy's stats are in terms of pairing up or assists, or even chances created, but it's like we're missing a whole different element of our game.
Yeah, it's that outlet, isn't it? And like you said, the unpredictability. We just lost a lot of potency with him. And one of the things that's been raised as well, Ed, I know you like to think that you're some sort of football manager guru, so this is a tactical question for you. Someone has posed a thought that Barnes, he's an out-and-out pacey player, isn't he? But he doesn't have that sort of inside forward play where he can drop in and receive the ball to feet, which doesn't give Chilwell the space to overlap him around the outside. And therefore, someone's saying that can these two players really play well together? It's interesting. It's definitely food for thought. But what do you make of that?
Well, probably not the answer you want looking for, but I don't think Chilwell will be here next year, so it's not a problem. But yeah, I don't know. We've got into a position where one of our strongest attacking options are those sort of full-backs who often actually end up becoming wing-backs. But as any regular listener will know, like, I'm a big fan of wingers anyway. I don't mind not having them that cut in. I quite like someone who's pacey and is willing to run at somebody, and I think that's sort of what we're lacking at the minute. Obviously, well, I think the major issue, like you said, more so than that option, is the loss of Ricardo. Like, I know everybody's based on a weirdly small sample size of like 2 or 3 appearances early in the season thinks James Justin's a great player and is the future, and this may be true, but if we're being honest with ourselves, he is one for the future, and he at this current moment in time, he isn't anywhere near as good as Ricardo, so it's a massive loss. Like, I don't think there's any getting way around that. Like, he can perform well and do a good job, and that's important for someone who's currently a backup. But there's a difference between saying he can do a job and he's got potential and constantly being one of the best right backs in the country. And obviously, given we've already spoken in this podcast that we've got quite poor strength in depth, when you lose one of your key attacking threats, as well as one of the key defensive players, for obvious reasons, he's a defender, like, it's a gaping hole, like, no matter what the replacement does, really. Sure.
It's not directly in response to what Ed said. I think that fundamentally, I would like us to see us bring in a bit of experience in those areas that we're struggling in. I'm not saying going full Iron Robin on it, which, to be fair, I've mentioned in the past. Obviously, he's gone back to his home club and fair play to him. But, like, someone with that experience, potentially even European experience, who can potentially teach those players younger than him, or alternatively actually be used firsthand later on in games, I would be totally open to seeing. Someone else I would have liked to have gone for, obviously he's going to Roma now, is Pedro. For me, underrated player, can go hot and cold, but I still think ultimately, look at what he's won: World Cups, Champions Leagues, league titles in a couple of countries, massive experience. Another player who's gone somewhere else is Ribery, Robin, like I've just mentioned. These sorts of players, yeah, they might be unachievable, they might still demand quite a high wage, you don't know, but experience, can you put a value on that? Not for me. I'm not saying go fully like get a load of like Cambiasos in left, right, centre, but look at the impact he made as well. We did that with Cambiaso, and we've not done it again since. So there can't be any harm in trying that for me. And
do you not think Gazal will do a job when he returns?
Well, no, the way he's being used as a sub, I think he got bought off for about 4 minutes the other day or something, Jamie told me. So let's not go there. But a player who's worth a mention, I'm not saying we're going to get him back either, because we're not. But big shout out to Kramaric, albeit against a weakened Dortmund side. He again, well, yeah, I guess you can call him a target man. He didn't work out for us at Leicester, but that sort of player, I'm not necessarily talking like a Zlatan, like a 6'8" type, but again, someone like Zlatan, another example of a player who worked at a big club, Man United, for example. So, yeah, these players might not be fashionable, but they certainly serve a purpose. So there's a bit of food for thought.
Right. You know, one thing, as we're talking about new players, and it sort of links nicely to what we discussed earlier about Norwich results and games in December and January. I've seen a lot of people now, and again, it's very easy to do this in hindsight, but really laying into people in charge of transfers for not doing anything in January other than sign a 4th choice centre back on loan or something like that. Like, we were in a very strong position then, and I feel like if we did, easier said than done obviously, if we did capitalise on that and bring in that flair winger then I don't know if we'd be in this situation now.
Well, it's very true, and as well, we would have been more of a proposition to a player at that stage. It'd have been easier to persuade a player saying, look, we've potentially got Champions League football next year, come and help be part of the project. Whereas now, if we don't get Champions League football, we're not going to be able to attract that same talent in the summer. But yeah, it is a bit strange. But I'm not one of these who's going to be criticising our recruitment team purely because of then again, yeah, you can name a lot of bad players we've signed, but the thing is, we have had a very good positive recruitment in terms of replacing players we've lost, namely, obviously Kante and Ndidi being the obvious one, I think. But yeah, then we haven't replaced players like Mahrez, so yeah, it's a valid argument.
We managed to get hugely sidetracked there, didn't we? Because we were talking about the Everton game, and we went off.
Yeah, similar, yeah.
But so we were talking about Leicester's midfield. I think Austin basically said that if Maddison is fit, he can come in. Assuming he's not, it's likely to be a Pratt and Tielemans and Ndidi 3. But the game now, Krys, looking at it, we were probably earmarking the first 2 games of the restart as games that we'd like to win. The Everton game is probably going to be one that we were said, yeah, it'd be good to win, but it's not the end of the world. But suddenly, this game has a hell of an importance, doesn't it, in the context of the season?
It does. I'm just looking at the table. So I didn't realise Everton are actually 12th. So they're currently on 41 points. And it could... Well, no, they've still got something to play for, especially if 8th gets awarded European football, then they're only 3 points off it. So, yeah, let's get it straight. There's a lot on the line for both teams here, actually. And obviously, Everton are probably one of the more... They've looked really good after lockdown, in my opinion. So for me, it's a huge game. Everton, it's one of those. Obviously, when there's a crowd there, it's different. Yes, that's stating the obvious, but like historically, Goodison Park for us hasn't been a very happy hunting ground. And with 2 teams going in opposite directions, it's going to be a stern test. And they have at the moment got the wide players and the attacking players that we are envious of. So it'll be interesting to see how we stop their threat and how we can potentially, impose our threat on their defence, which would come out of the blue, quite frankly, at the moment.
Yeah, they're getting a lot of plaudits for their recent performances, aren't they? And I think managers obviously coming in for a lot of praise as well. I mean, their form is pretty good. They're beating the teams that they're expected to. Some losses against Arsenal and Chelsea, managed to draw with Everton, and then obviously beat Norwich last time out. Ed, where do you see their main threat coming from? They've got a lot of expensive players, the likes of Richarlison and Sigurdsson. They spent a lot of money on, but is there anyone in particular that you look at and think that you'd be concerned about coming up against?
Well, I guess the 2 sort of standout players for me this season anyway has been sort of Richarlison, for obvious reasons. I guess he's been doing it for a couple of years now. But Calvert-Lewin sort of jumped onto the scene, hasn't he? Always felt like he was a bit of a rotation player, young guy with prospect. And then this season, what's he got? Probably 10 to 15 goals-ish this year. And before the break anyway, I know from my fancy football exploits, but less said about that, the better this year, that he has been scoring frequently. So he's certainly, I guess, up front is their sort of area for most concern. But I just think this is such a massive game, really. Like this one and the next one. I know before the break, I kept talking about matches in sort of groups of fixtures where runs are really important. And I know 2 games aren't really a run, but after these 2, we've got it's not quite, it's a very tricky end of the season with 4 of like the current top 10 or something like that. And I'm genuinely thinking, given the form of the other 2 teams, the other 3 teams below us, like we can't afford to lose either of these. Like I genuinely think like my confidence is shot in Leicester at the minute. I think if we lose one of the next 2 games, like I genuinely don't think we can say like goodbye to a top 4 finish.
So Austin, I mean, looking at those teams that Ed's mentioned, obviously you've got Chelsea, who are now only a point behind us, and they're at home to Watford. Wolves, they've got a game in hand, but we've got a game in hand on them, but they're against lower league opposition in Arsenal. And then you've got Man United, who are against the just god-awful Bournemouth. So the likelihood is that you could easily see 3 wins in the chasing pack. So like Ed says, does that make this game almost crucial for Leicester to pick up some points?
I think both the Everton game and the next one, I think they're both must wins. Chelsea's won 5 in their last 5. Obviously, there's a 3-month break in there, but still won 5 out of the 5. Wolves have won 4-4, maybe. They've at least won all 3 games since the restart. But I think they're definitely must-win games to be had. Because United's so 50-50. They could come out there and look like they're a title-winning team, and the next day they can look like a bottom table team. They're the weirdest team I can ever think of next to Arsenal. But yeah, I think they're definitely must-wins for sure.
I mean, Leicester, they've really got to start well, haven't they? We've got to see some big performances as well. We desperately need to get Vardy involved in the game more than he has been. But, I mean, should we try and inject some sort of positivity into this? Krys, do you want to do a prediction? Maybe go for a Leicester win? Try and cheer us all up a little bit.
I was just thinking off of that while she was chatting there. And I'm going to stick with the same prediction as I went with for Chelsea. And it was a tight game in hindsight. I do see a lot of low-scoring games at the moment. I'm going to go with 1-0 to Leicester City again, more in hope than anything. I think if we are going to win a match, I just don't see us suddenly. I mean, I'd love to be proven wrong and see us go out and score 3 goals, but for me, that'd be incredible. So I think if we're going to win a game, we're going to just get over the line. So I'm going to go 1-0, and I think our goal is going to come from a header, and it's going to be a set piece. Something that we've not been great at recently, but I'm going to go with Sionchu header 1-0 Leicester.
Good, positive prediction, like it. Ed, you gonna follow suit?
Not in terms of positive, sorry. I'm going to say 1-1. I don't think we're very good at the moment. Simply put, I'd take 1-1 as a positive because it means we've scored. Obviously, a win. I do think it will be a low-scoring game. Everton themselves have only scored 1 goal in their 2 games back, and they've not conceded yet. So we've only scored 1 and conceded 1. So it's probably going to be 3-4 or something like that now. But I'm going for 1-1, though a sneaky 1-0 wouldn't go amiss.
Very good. Austin, what's your prediction?
Before the year, I predicted 2-1. I will say my one hope is that it's a better game than it was this fixture last year, because we won, which I'll for sure take at this point. I really couldn't care how the game goes, but for watching purposes, I hope it's better. But I think I'll actually stick with the 2-1. I got faith in our back line, but we're definitely not as solid as we used to be. That could definitely be because Pereira, but I do think that back line gets a little exposed at times. But, Vardy's got to show up. He's our man. He's still the Golden Boot leader, I still believe, by 2 goals. And I can't think of the players behind him, but I know for sure it's Aubameyang. I can't remember how far Salah's back, but I see him scoring once, if not twice. It's got to happen at some point.
I like the fact we're just clinging to that sort of hope now. Like, surely it's got to come right in the end.
The second goal scorer is Danny Ings, by the way.
Yeah, he must be. Well, he scored again yesterday.
It's 1 goal off Vardy.
Oh wow. I don't know. I think it was this game last year, wasn't it, that Vardy, we were penned in our own half literally about 80% of the game. Vardy scored and then went and did a backflip in front of their fans, didn't he?
That was the greatest thing ever.
So I think if we can do that again, I would absolutely take us sort of, to coin a phrase, shithousing our way to a 1-0 win. But I don't know. Let's be wildly optimistic and say we're going to win by 3-1. Why not? Let's just.
What evidence have you got to back that up?
Because we've been so bad, and it's just at some point it's going to click and everything is going to come right again. We've definitely got the squad to do it. I mean, there is quality throughout there, and if we can get going, and Everton are going to come out and play a bit. They don't like to sit back too much, do they? They can be quite direct, but they ultimately want to play football. And I think if we can get out and make it a game of football against them, we've got a good chance.
James, if we win 3-1, I'm going to set a flare off in my house.
I was about to ask you about that.
That was literally the most distracting thing I've ever had. Just being asked a question while watching some bloke set a smoke bomb off in his own house.
And
his wife must be furious.
I actually know the guy who did it. He lives at home with his mum, I think. So I'm not sure how that went down. But no, I've got. There's no more topical time for me to mention it. But how much does Jamie look like Jody Morris?
I said this to you, didn't I?
Goodness.
He looks. I'm going to have to get this up on Twitter, when we're really dry in need of followers again. But I think you're a spitting image. I'm surprised no one said it in the studio. Now you're best mates with Ria Ferdinand, Jake Humphrey, etc. But
the face of Leicester City.
Yeah, literally. One famous Leicester fan once said he was the face of Leicester City, but I think you're the face of Leicester City. To be fair,
he's doing it next season.
My dad said that I had a face for radio after watching that, so that's really
Big John.
Big John, he's giving me pelters. I'm just Googled Jody Morris and I can see it, which is very disappointing.
I can see it.
He's not the tallest either, which is great. So really, pretty much the same person. But yeah, no, it was good fun yesterday. It was very interesting listening to them sort of talk off air and what they're saying about the game, and you know how obviously they do the analysis on the screen. It's very well polished and stuff. They're sort of them doing the research into that, listening into that was great.
You're just there constantly. You can see what they're doing. Yeah,
this was basically you have an open Skype call where you've got the broadcast feed on your Skype, and they've got obviously your feed from your camera, and so you can just hear anything the presenters say throughout the game and throughout the outbreaks and stuff. You don't have ads on the screen. You've just got what the camera's looking at.
I see. No, that's interesting. Bit of insight there for your listeners. You see, I didn't know that, Jamie.
Yeah.
I don't think the listeners know what we're talking about, to be honest.
Oh yeah, we've given zero context, have we?
JB was on BT Sport yesterday for our English or British listeners. And yeah, he was wearing this lovely pink away top. Hard to miss him. As soon as I turned the TV on, I was like, that's Jamie, I know him.
It's a great big. Yeah, and I was just chatting with my mate Rio. We're on first name terms. I mean, granted, he got my name wrong the first time he called me James, but he called me Jamie eventually. But no, it was great fun. It was just the fact that we're obviously in this fan wall and all on the screen, and the guy sat above me was a guy I went to school with.
You should have bantered him back, called him Les or something.
Oh my God, imagine.
Or what was his brother called? Anton. Yeah.
Anton. Yeah. I don't know what. I think it probably would have been worse calling him Les than calling him Anton, to be honest. Yeah, that's it. But no, it was great experience, and I just think the commitment of the guy to sit in his mum's house and set a smoke bomb off is something else.
And we still lost, so.
And we lost. Yeah. He was obviously just waiting for us to score in the hope he could do it, wasn't he?
Well, if he did it in the stadium, it obviously would have really spurred the players on to perform. But alas, we're not allowed in the stadium.
No, well, hopefully soon. Right, listen, any other nonsense that you guys want to add in?
No.
Has that been discussed in past podcasts about the fans not being there?
Do you not listen to your own podcast, Edward?
Yeah.
I have listened to most of them.
Edward, I know you've been busy, but that's very hurtful. That is very hurtful.
I think when we were scraping the barrel for content in our lockdown podcast, we probably spoke about the absence of fans.
Well,
we did.
Based on, again, something I've just read. Do you think Chilwell would have stood there and put his arms up and moaned if there was 30,000 fans telling him to close the player down?
Yeah.
Or likewise, would he have just stood off, and do you think that would have made any difference?
Well, if it is human instinct, as Jamie says, then it wouldn't have made a difference, would it? Well, here's the logical answer to that. I don't think it. You see players do it in full stadiums all the time. I just think that they just stop for some reason. That's what I can't get my head around. So yeah, I don't think it would have made a difference.
No.
There you go.
But one thing's for sure, definitely isn't the same without being in the stadium, is it? They can add all the crowd noise in they want, but I don't think the games are quite as good as if they had been.
Well, if anything, actually, sorry to jump in, because I know you're about to wrap up, but surely, Ed, the players can hear each other 100 times better. So there's no excuses for their communication to be that bad that they're not communicating well enough to close those gaps. They've never been able to hear each other as clearly as they can now. So team communication is fairly to blame for what happened yesterday.
Yeah. Efficiency of communication.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For those Office fans out there, they'll get the reference.
Very niche. Right, Ed, obviously, as you've been on your travels, not listening to the podcast, would you like the honours of closing this one off?
Oh, well, now
Big
you give me,
pressure.
I can't say no, can I? For all three of you who are still listening, I appreciate the fact you've put up with us for what's that, an hour and something, I'm guessing. But yeah, thanks for listening, as per. Hoped it's been enjoyable, and if I can be bothered, I will be back next time. If not, it will be Krys, Austin, and Jamie. No, I will be back. And actually, one thing I would like to say is,
You just had a full conversation with yourself.
Yeah, no, because things keep popping into my head. I don't stop thinking because I'm a weirdo. Somebody did actually message us asking where I was, and I thought that was nice. I am fine. I've just been busy. Thank you for caring.
God, Ed, I asked
Timothy Reyes there with a shout out. He was one of the first people to listen and give us feedback, which we obviously appreciate. But he sounded so concerned for Ed.
Well, who knows in this current climate?
Well, I think he thought that we'd binned you off.
Well, I'm here. Might not be here again after this performance, but...
I mean, Ed, I asked you to wrap it up, not turn it into the Ed Noon Shot monologues.
Yeah.
Ed's standalone podcast, things keep popping into my head, is coming soon. All major providers.
Right, thank you for listening, and we'll be back next week. Bye-bye.
See you then. Bye.